Yeah, I'm okay. And you?
I am also doing well. First of all, we understand that new IGP will be sworn in later today,
Well, that is true. At 11 a.m. this morning.
11 a.m. this morning.
Yeah.
Has the presidency received an injunction that has been sought for
We are
by
not
Imani
aware of any
Kwesieni?
injunction by anybody.
But then, how do you respond to the suggestion from them that you do not have the authority to do that, that you can only remove an IGP on the basis
That
of...
is not true. If you read the statement that I put out, I quoted the relevant provisions of law. Article 91, Article 202. Article 91 enjoins the president to consult with the Council of State. Article 202 expressly states that the IGP shall be appointed by the president in consultation with the Council of State. So there is no other legislation anywhere that bars the president from doing what he did last night.
Well, if you do receive that injunction, what happens?
Well, I'm sure the Attorney General will advise on the next steps, but I'm not aware of any injunction.
I see. Well,
and I don't know why any citizen would want to insist that a particular person must be in a particular job. Nobody should have that right to dictate to any government who should be appointed. And I think that whilst we deeply respect the contributions of civil society and persons within society who want to offer different perspectives on governance, it is important that we don't create synagogues and establish a precedent where, because certain individuals have specific rapport with some people in society, they feel that they are protected from the application of the same principles and conventions and laws that have guided the way that we've operated. Mr. Akufu Dampare is not the first IGP. He will not be the last IGP. Every single president who has been in office since at least the beginning of the Fourth Republic has had occasion to appoint an IGP or remove an IGP in accordance with law. So why is a different precedent being sought? Why is it that an impression is being created that as for some categories of people, they are untouchable only because they are friends with persons who have a voice in the media? I don't think that it is a precedent that we should be accepting. Unless it can be stated that any specific law has been violated. As we speak, no law has been violated. The persons speaking about an injunction say they've gone to court. There's no judicial pronouncement on the matter as I speak. So nothing bars the president. And the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That is why the relevant provisions of the Constitution are quoted in the statement that I issued. And anybody who does a carefree search for those provisions will see that the president was on terra firma when they caused the announcement to be made yesterday.
Well, there are those who held the opinion that based on the way he handled security ahead of during the elections, he's proven that he's one that you can retain in office no matter the party involved. What do you make of that suggestion?
Senator, there have been many IGPs who have superintended peaceful elections in this country. In fact, there have been more peaceful elections in Ghana than the 2024 elections. And as I had cause to say some weeks ago, the IGP didn't have done anything wrong to be removed. If the president believes that a new path should be charted, that a certain new direction should be brought to the management of the Ghana Police Service, and he finds that there's somebody who can get that job done, he is at liberty to make that appointment. As he is at liberty to remove all persons and appoint any person to the extent that the Constitution grants him the power and authority to do so.
Well, that was just by the way. But the main reason we called you was because of the budget that was put out by the government earlier this week. So far, and you are in charge of government communications. Majority of the time when you put out a budget, you are under a lot of pressure. But so far, are you happy with the reception the budget has gotten?
Well, it has received widespread acceptance. And I don't remember the last time a budget was this warmly welcomed by the generality of Ghanaians. It is an indication that the budget was well considered, and the policies and programs contained in there are things that sit well with people, and people expect that once the implementation of the things contained in the budget starts, they are going to see improvements in their daily lives. So I guess that is why people have received it so well. It also reflects a certain level of diligence and thoroughness in the drafting of the budget. It means that the sentiments and views and aspirations of Ghanaians are found expression in the same budget.
I see widespread acceptance for you. Most people you have listened to so far, you feel that they feel you got it right.
Oh yes, I've had the opportunity to interact with many people. I've been on many programs where ordinary people have expressed their views. I've listened to media broadcasts, and I've heard programming on various radio and TV stations where people have expressed satisfaction with the nature of the programs contained in the budget. But of course, the real test is when implementation begins, and that is what we are set about doing as a government.
And I think one of the things that has, of course, received that level of acceptance people are happy about was the cuts to some of the removal of some of the levies and taxes. When should we expect this to take effect?
Well, as I speak to you, the finance minister has gone to Parliament with proposed amendments to various bills, which, once passed by Parliament, would mean that those taxes cease to exist. So it is now in the bosom of Parliament to ensure the passage of the amendments that the finance minister has proposed.
What happens to the VAT, and how soon should we expect what the finance minister promised in the budget?
Well, the finance minister, as he indicated in the budget, has commissioned work on a comprehensive review of the whole VAT regime because he believes that it is distorted and it's pretty unfair on the persons who pay VAT. And he indicated in the budget that by the close of the year, the outcome of that work that he's commissioned should be available. And once that happens, he will proceed to carry out the reforms, which will result in the abolition of the COVID levy and the streamlining of other components of VAT.
Well, in the meantime, there's been an appeal from, and I heard that from Kojo Nkrumah yesterday, where he raises issue the fact that in the budget you do not state particularly how you intend to fund Agenda 111 hospitals, even though you've indicated that you continue and finish them. And his appeal is that do not abandon the projects that
the
finish them.
The president gave account of the state of Agenda 111. We require $1.5 billion. That's in excess of 30 billion Ghana cedis to get it completed. What that means is that government will struggle to get 30 billion Ghana cedis immediately to complete those projects. So we have to look for new financing models. So the president has tasked the Minister of Health to come up with proposals on how this can be done. He has also extended an invitation to private entities, missions, and what have you, who are interested in partnering government to complete and run these hospitals. So there's a plan underway to determine how to complete those projects. So it's not as though Agenda 111 has been abandoned. But of course, Kojo Oppong and his colleagues also need to acknowledge that the way that they implemented that program was wrong. They did not have funding and yet committed themselves to building and completing 101 hospitals at the same time when there was no dedicated funding. They spent $400 million spreading themselves in to build hospitals that they could not complete, when that same amount could have completed 22 hospitals of the design that we find in Agenda 111. So clearly, they botched the project and therefore have unloaded that onto the new administration. But we take responsibility as a government, and so plans are underway to determine a funding mechanism that will ensure that we complete these hospitals.
And then, and I guess, and I'm going to the minority press. I raised some of the issues they raised subsequently, but a few things. One, they have an issue with the fact that you are spending the entire. They suggest that you are spending the entire ABFA on Big Push. Is that exactly what was communicated in the budget?
Yeah, that's what was communicated. The share of ABFA, which will come to the budget, will be spent on Big Push. So it's dedicated funding for Big Push. That is what it is. And there's nothing wrong with it. Because infrastructure is needed. The reason why there is Big Push in the first place is that as a country, we have need for infrastructure. People continue to suffer in ways that they should not because of the lack of critical infrastructure. Infrastructure also plays a direct role in economic expansion and growth. Economic expansion and growth leads to improved job opportunities, which then lead to improved incomes. Improved incomes lead to better standards of living. So it is a win-win situation for everybody. And therefore, I do not know the specific problem that the minority has with using money from oil proceeds to develop critically needed infrastructure.
So, and this is what, and I think I heard Abena Osasari say clearly that there's no clarity as to what this Big Push would do exactly. That you just talked about putting money in there without clarifying exactly where that money will go to.
I'm not sure what clarity Abena needs again. Every ministry has a work program. So the ministries that work on infrastructure, from roads to transport to communications to energy, all have a work program for the year. They submitted same to the finance minister. In fact, the finance minister has indicated that ministers will be coming to the dispatch box in Parliament to outline their work program and engage the people and through their MPs on what the plans are to roll out their program for the year and what the priorities are. So when these projects are to be executed, a clear communication will go out, as has been the case for all projects that have been undertaken in Ghana. So it's not too clear to me what she means when she says there's no clarity. The minister cannot cite every single project that will be executed in the year. That would be impossible to do in a budget. But we all know what specific infrastructure needs there are in the country. So if you look in the NDC manifesto, we spoke about orbital roads, which essentially are major ring roads that take traffic outside of cities in order to reduce congestion. We speak about light rail. We speak about communication infrastructure, energy infrastructure, water infrastructure, and what have you. So Big Push, which is money for the execution of these projects, will be pushed into the funding of these projects. And it will be clear. There will be clear accountability mechanisms. There will be transparency in the award of contracts. So everybody will know exactly what the money is to be used for.
So basically, every infrastructure project under the budget will be funded from the ABFA?
No. The Big Push are strategic investment infrastructure. There's money from various sources for other forms of infrastructure. For instance, the Business Assembly's Common Fund is released annually. And the objective of that is to provide basic infrastructure in communities, especially in rural areas. But Big Push will be used for strategic national infrastructure. So it's not every infrastructure project that government will undertake that will come from Big Push. Big Push is dedicated to specific strategic infrastructure interventions that have the potential to add value to our economy.
The other issue they have a problem is the U-Start. I think the U-Start and one other policy that they said were providing much needed support to small businesses, that when you take it away, it will affect them, it will take away that support that they were getting. So they think that is one that you need to maintain. What do you think?
Personally, there's no shortage of programs in this budget to support small-scale businesses. The MPP has a penchant for reciting slogans that mean nothing. So they engage in sloganeering and launch programs with pomp and pageantry. And then at the end of the day, no tangible outcomes are achieved. So they've been at it for 8 years, and Ghanaians voted overwhelmingly against them, which means that they were simply not impressed with the outcomes of this supposed slogan. But if you look into the budget, there's a tall list of interventions that small and medium enterprises are going to benefit from. For instance, the Ejumeriwa project has 100 million Ghana cedis dedicated to it. the 1 million coders program has 100 million Ghana cedis dedicated to it. The National Apprenticeship Program has 300 million Ghana cedis dedicated to it, and so on and so forth. So there are many interventions in this budget that will help small scale industry. So the MPP, before they established USTAT, came to meet programs that previous governments were implementing. They scrapped those, and they were at liberty to do that. We too are at liberty to reorder our priorities and decide that these are the steps that we believe we can take to achieve our objectives. In any event, the Ghana report gave us a mandate to execute the promises that we made to them. And in those promises are some of these programs that I have outlined. So we have not done anything outside of the mandate given us by the people of Ghana.
The budget that goes into government communications has also come under some scrutiny. That even though you say you have made, because you are no longer running the Ministry of Information, you talk about the fact that there's only yourself, Shamima, and a few other people who are assisting with government communication. But you're talking about millions of Ghana cedis being budgeted for you. That they're wondering what you're going to use the money for. When they're
that is deliberate disinformation by people who should know better. To begin with, the budget of the Ministry of Information for last year was 226 million Ghana cedis. I've heard them claim that they had only 6 million or 10 million. It was 226 million Ghana cedis. And it is in Appendix 4A of the 2024 budget, page 179. Anybody listening to me can check. 226 million. Now, even though the ministry doesn't exist, which means that we are making savings on the running of the ministry, because that ministry, apart from having a minister, at some point they had 2 deputy ministers and all manner of political aides and special assistants and what have you. Also had 76 directors, all of whom had to be given financing in terms of giving them the tools necessary for them to execute their mandate, which was managing government information dissemination. President believes that we don't need that huge charter to get government information managed. So he has scrapped the ministry. But that is the ministry, because the ministry consists of the political administration, which is the minister, his deputies, if there are any other supporting staff, and then directors. Put together, there were 76 of them. So once the ministry leaves, that structure leaves. But in addition to this structure are agencies which have been there for decades, which carry out specific functions and which have not been scrapped because they don't need to be scrapped. Except that President Ama believes that managing these agencies requires leaner staff. And that is why there is myself and a handful of people who are doing that now. But the agencies remain, and the civil servants who work there remain, because they have security of tenure guaranteed by law. So you cannot remove them, you cannot sack them. The most you can do is to reassign them. Now these agencies must run during the year. So there are 3 of them. There is the Ghana News Agency, the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, and the Information Service Department. These 3 agencies alone have 2,500 employees. They need a budget to carry out their mandate. So there's what you call the goods and services budget. That is from which you can procure basic items needed to run the agencies. And then there's what you call capital expenditure, which is for projects that these agencies need to execute in order to facilitate their work. So the 78 million you see in the budget is for the use of these 3 agencies. Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, which has a staff strength of 1,115. Then the Information Service Department, which has 1,309 employees. And the Ghana News Agency, that has 133 employees. So the amount you see in the budget is for them. In 2024, it was 226 million Ghana cedis that was given to these 3 agencies. This year, we are giving them 78 million. My office, which is the office of the Minister of State for Government Communication, is not getting 8.8 million for goods and services. Neither are we getting 70 million Ghana cedis, because then I operate in a 1-room office with a small office for my administrative staff, who are just 2. in number. We don't need 8.8 million for goods and services. Neither do we need any capital expenditure in that office. So any capital expenditure or goods and services you see is for the agencies under the ministry. This is clear, this is simple, this is straightforward. Kojo, Oppong, Nkrumah, Gideon, Boako'S, and all the MPP guys speaking about this know this for a fact. But they are deliberately disinforming Ghanaians in order to score what they believe will be political points, because we put them under scrutiny for the wanton waste of public resources. I have heard them also say that some 6 million Ghana cedis was allocated to the ministry last year. If they did, then there is not in the budget. Then they have to come and account for what they did with the 6 million Ghana cedis. But we have not had no such allocation made to us because we don't need such allocations.
You mean to when Kojo Oppong Nkrumah was there, or spending on before appropriation?
No, when he was there, every year a certain amount was allocated for the management of government communication. That is separate from money allocated to agencies. But since we've been in power, no such monies have been allocated to us, because the office, as I have told you, has been collapsed into one room for myself and a small room for my administrative staff, who help myself, my deputy Shamima, and Mamia Maprat, who is the press secretary to the vice president. Mind you, we also double as the people who manage the presidency's communications. So it's a very lean staff, and we don't require any goods and services or capital expenditure. So none has been allocated to us. So when you see government communication, it is just that for reporting purposes and for purposes of supervision, all the agencies under the SWAL Ministry of Information have come under my supervision, and therefore they will put it under my office. But it is not for my personal use or the use of my staff. It is for the use of the agencies, 3 of them. And at the end of the year, the agencies will account for how they've used these monies.
They also suggest that a careful scrutiny of the budget shows that even though you say you are cutting down, it seems you are sending a lot more to the presidency than they did, even though your numbers are supposed to be smaller. Well,
it shows that they have not carried out such a careful scrutiny as they claim. But if you carefully scrutinize the budget, you will find out what they are saying is not true. Senna, I have already told you that some agencies have been collapsed. Before President Mahama became president, there were 30 ministries. Then he promulgated an executive instrument which reduced these agencies to 23. So that automatically means that 7 ministries have been collapsed. Not so. However, each of these 7 ministries had agencies under it. So there has been a redistribution of those agencies. Mind you, the moment you collapse a ministry, you make automatic savings on the political and administrative machinery that runs the agencies under that ministry. So, for instance, now that the information ministry doesn't exist, there's no minister or deputies or special assistants and 76 directors. It's been collapsed into a unit run by just 5 people, myself, Samima, my deputy, and 2 other people. Same for the Ministry of National Security and all the others that were collapsed. But the agencies, which are decades-old state agencies established long before this government came to power, remain to perform specific assignments. So when you go to the Ministry of National Security, for instance, there's a National Security Secretariat, Research Department, National Signals Bureau, National Intelligence Bureau, which used to be called the BNI, Bureau of National Investigations. These agencies remain. And Senna, you know that these are absolutely necessary and critical agencies that you cannot do without, because they are primarily focused on ensuring Ghana's security. But they no longer have a parent ministry called the Ministry of National Security. The same for the agencies under the Ministry of Information. So these 7 agencies have had to go under the office of the president for purposes of budgeting and in some cases purposes of coordination and supervision. Already, if you pick what you call the office of the president, it is made up of 6 units. That's the General Administration, the Chief of Staff Secretariat, the Vice President Secretariat, the Press Secretariat, and then what you call Policy Planning and Coordination Units. So 6 units. In addition to these 6, there are other agencies under the MPP there were 20 other agencies. 20 other agencies, including Council of State, the Ghana AIDS Commission, the National Identification Authority, and many others. 20 under the MPP. We have scrapped 3 of the ones that we came to meet, but we have added the National Security Secretariat, the National Signals Bureau, the Research Department, and the National Intelligence Bureau, and the GNA, Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, and ISD. Now, all these service agencies have huge staff of civil servants, and I gave you the breakdown of the staffing of the 3 agencies under the Government Communication, the Minister of State for Government Communication. Those 3 agencies, GNA, ISD, and GBC, put together, have a total civil servant staff strength of 2,500. Same for national security and the others I've mentioned. So naturally, if you bring those people under the office of the president for budgetary purposes, you will see that the budget for compensation simply means wages and salaries. So now you and I know that the wages and salaries of civil servants are statutory. It is not something you can touch. Also, if you want to understand why it has gone up, check the budgets of the agencies that have been added for last year. The budget for the National Security Secretariat alone for last year, 2004, under the MPP, was 1.280 billion Ghana cedis. 1.28 billion Ghana cedis. And the budget for the Ministry of Information staff alone for last year was 148 million Ghana cedis. So if you go through that of Research Department and National Intelligence Bureau, what have you, you clearly have an idea of what their budget is. So naturally, if you add that to the salaries of the civil servants under the 23 agencies that existed already under the MPP, naturally, the compensation and wage staff, budget will go up. However, if it was the case that no new agencies have come under office of the president, the same number of agencies remain. But President Mama has gone to appoint so many political appointees, and the budget has gone up. Then you have a case. President Mama has now appointed a single civil servant, I beg your pardon, in addition to those he came to meet. Under the MPP, there were 336 political appointees, including presidential staffers. President Mama has only appointed 30 people who you can classify as political appointees. For now, we are in the process of recruiting supporting staff, but they will come nowhere near the 336 under the MPP. They are 30 as I speak to you. 30 people cannot take the wage budget or compensation budget of the office of the president to 2.7 billion. It would not make sense. So it is the additional civil servants who have had to come under the office of the president because their parent ministries don't exist. But they need a mother institution that will provide budgetary space for them. And that is the only reason why they have come under the office of the president, for budgetary purposes. Because when the budget is being prepared, agencies are not treated in isolation. They are grouped under mother agencies. That is what the ministries used to do. But once the ministries don't exist, they must go under a new agency. That's why they've come under the office of the president. Last week, the president appointed the Interior Minister, Honorable Alhaji Muntaka, as the supervising minister for national security. But that is only for purposes of reporting to Parliament and other relevant agencies. But in terms of their budget, it falls under the office of the president. So, Senator, that is the only explanation for why you see 2.7 billion. It is not money given to President Mama to spend on political appointees like President Akufo-Addo was doing. But if you want to see the real impact of the cuts President Mama is making, you need to look at what we call discretionary expenditure. Discretionary expenditure is a part of the budget that you can touch, as in you can decide what to spend and what not to spend, or you can decide whether to spend or not to spend. And if you look at it, under the MPP, the budget for goods and services, which essentially is what President Akufo-Addo used to take money from to go and rent aircraft and what have you, was 946 million Ghana cedis. That was the budget for goods and services last year. Sorry, it was 912 million Ghana cedis. If you come to CAPEX, capital expenditure, which is what you can decide to spend on projects under any agency, the capital expenditure budget for the Office of Government Machinery alone was 612 million Ghana cedis. Then this year, the capital expenditure budget for the Office of Government Machinery has been slashed to 269 million from 612 Ghana cedis. A million Ghana cedis, I beg your pardon. The goods and services budget for Office of Government Machinery this year is 847 million. If you put these two together, we are talking more than 345 million Ghana cedis in savings alone for this year. So if the MPP had indeed carried out a thorough scrutiny of the budget, they will not be saying the things they are saying. They know they are peddling falsehood and putting in deliberate disinformation in order to deceive people. Now, I have been shocked, for instance, to hear them say that in the budget, 50 million Ghana cedis has been allocated for research at the presidency. That is because when you look at the budget, there's a line item called Research Department.
Yes.
And 50 million Ghana cedis has been allocated for goods and services. Senna, unfortunately, I'm going to have to disclose this. The Research Department is our external intelligence agency. I'm sure you've heard people say Audi.
Yes.
That is the Research Department. It's one of the most secretive intelligence agencies we have. People are familiar with the BNI, but they don't know the Research Department. It has existed since Nkrumah's days. So because it's an intelligence agency, they need to be allocated a budget, as they were allocated a budget last year and the year before and the year before that. But people in the MPP who are supposed to know better, including people who have been information ministers, who should know, are going about saying that when you see Research Department, it means that a research unit has been created at the presidency and given 50 million Ghana cedis. Which is bizarre, it is ridiculous, and so unacceptable. It is such a display of ignorance, it cannot be accepted. So anybody listening to me, when you see Research Department, we are talking about an external intelligence agency.
No, it is not Googling and...
It is vital in ensuring the safety and security of this country. So they are the ones that have been given the 50 million as their goods and services budget.
Okay. Because
most of their agents are based outside, and therefore their salaries have to be paid. They are, the logistics they need for their work has to be provided, as all other government workers are given. So when somebody comes to tell you that this shows that the budget of the Office of President has increased, they don't know what they are talking about. Either they are displaying spectacular ignorance or they are doing deliberate mischief.
Well, Felix, the people who were sitting there, former information minister, former minister for finance, someone who was special. In fact, the person who said this was an aide to the vice president. You're suggesting that they did not know this, or they were...
everybody's time in that position. He clearly didn't know what was happening around him. He had no clue about governance, and yet was holding himself out as the aide of a whole vice president. So how can the aide of a vice president not know about the Research Department? Especially when it was the case that any time the vice president traveled, and he was on those trips all the time, there were officials from the Research Department who chaperoned them and facilitated their stay.
You see, then there's a case of them saying your total budget is 291 billion. That is not...
yes, but what is wrong with the budget? Who says that the budget for this year should be the same as last year? You need to look at the allocations, and then you will find that the reason why the budget for this year is bigger than last year is that we are going to do more this year than was done last year. The budget for last year was bigger than the budget for 2023. Every single budget is bigger than the preceding budget. It is normal. Because government looks for more money as the years go by to be able to execute this project. So there's nothing wrong with having a budget of 291 billion. That is how come we are able to allocate more to health this year than was done last year, and allocate more to various programs than was done last year.
I see. Because the promise was fiscal consolidation. That you should be spending closer to your revenue.
Yes. Fiscal consolidation means that you cut money into that goes to non-essential expenditure, goods and services. So that has been cut. But you have to put money in productive sectors so that your economy grows. So fiscal consolidation doesn't mean you do a wholesale cut of the budget. You cut expenses that are not essential. That is what it means. For instance, education. You don't cut money that should go to schools for them to be able to train the next generation of Ghana's human resource. You can't cut money that should go into research carried out by various education institutions. You go to health. President Mahama has said that get price should be uncapped so that money can be found to fully finance and fully finance. So now who can quarrel with any government that allocates more money to the financing of secondary education? So this year, we've allocated 3.5 billion Ghana cedis to senior high school education. How can that be wrong? How can anybody criticize government because we are making more money available to educating our children so that they don't sleep in congested dormitories, they don't eat poor quality food, so that this obnoxious double track is gotten rid of? So I don't go to school for 2 weeks and come and sit at home for 3 months. If you go to health again, the NHIL, for many years, they were not receiving the full complement of the funds they should receive because the MPP government had capped it. So President Mahama says he has uncapped it to make more money available so that people who suffer chronic diseases like kidney diseases, hypertension, diabetes, and what have you, are giving money for treatment. That's what we call the Ghana Care Trust Fund, or Mahama Care for short. So that we'll be able to find money to do primary health care, to treat basic diseases, to relieve pressure of the National Health Insurance Scheme. And then the National Health Insurance Scheme itself will receive full finances so that people don't go to hospital with NHIS card and are told that the treatment they received is not covered by NHIS and that they have to pay money. So if we allocate more resources for this, it cannot be a problem. However, if you allocate more resources to 126 ministers, give each one of them a Land Cruiser costing $140,000, give each one of them a saloon car costing $50,000 to $60,000, give each one of them a bungalow, give them a driver, a cook, a domestic staff, pay for their DSTV monthly, pay for their fuel every day, give them travel allowances when they travel, buy them first class or business class tickets when they travel. That is where there will be a problem. If you are spending on the personal comfort of political appointees, if you load 336 MPP activists and go and put them at the presidency and pay them huge sums of money to do propaganda against political opponents, that is wasting money. But if you increase allocation to free SSS, nobody can begrudge you. It cannot be bad expenditure. So that's the budget this year is bigger than last year. It's only an indication of the government's commitment to do more for the people of Ghana than the previous government did.
I see. I want to respond to this for me, because one of the things we heard that scandalized, most Ghanaians were scandalized when the finance minister was talking about how much you need to do debt servicing, pay for debts, among others. This is Gideon Boako'S response.
Billion next year, and the others 50-something billion the following year. If Akufo-Addo in 8 years has left you 153 billion as interest payments on the domestic market to pay, and in 2 months, you have borrowed 73 billion cedis from the domestic market. You say Akufo-Addo left you 153 billion in 8 years. But in 2 months, this finance minister has borrowed 73 billion cedis from the domestic market. In fact, today is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or today is Thursday. Tomorrow, Friday, the finance minister is going to borrow additional 6 billion from the domestic market, pushing it to over around 79 billion, close to 80 billion in 2 months. And this debt that you are accumulating, who will come and pay? You are leaving it for the next government to also come and pay. So this is so serious for us on the part that they are borrowing. So we can see.
And I guess you heard him.
But the man who doesn't know the difference between the research department and the research unit at the presidency, what they expect from me? First of all, you must understand what has happened. Because of the terrible mismanagement of the economy, Ghana has been banned from borrowing anywhere. No bank will advance us money, and we cannot borrow on the bond market. So the only place government can borrow is the treasury bills market. And as for borrowing, it's normal routine activity in the management of any economy anywhere in the world. But there are differences which Gideon knows. He is engaging in deliberate disinformation. What happened is that because of the large debt they left, and they borrowed on the T-bills market every day when they were in power. But T-bills borrowing is short term. There's 91 day, 182 day, and 362 day. And I'm sure you know the Senate.
Yes.
So when you borrow, every 3 months you have to pay. We have been in power for 2 months, haven't we? So how could we possibly have borrowed and be liable for payments in 3 months? It is because of what they borrowed. Senate, in the last 7 weeks alone, over 60 billion Ghana cedis of the debt they left has been due for payment on the T-bills market. So all the finance minister does is what you call rollover. So you simply say that, oh, I borrowed you, I have to pay. But the time is up. So just let me maintain the money I owe you, and let's negotiate a new interest rate. So you call it rollover. Or in other words, Senna, I have borrowed money from you, and it is due for payment. Say 1,000 cedis. So I go to Kwakye, your producer, and borrow 1,000 cedis from him to give to you. When I do that, my debt has not increased. You understand me? I have only taken 1,000 cedis to pay 1,000 cedis. So I owe 1,000 cedis. So it doesn't move. That is why if you pick Ghana's debt today, it is still 221 billion Ghana cedis like you came to meet. So that borrowing he's talking about is regular T-bills operations carried out by all finance ministers since time immemorial. In any event, that is the only place where government can borrow because of the terrible mismanagement of the economy by Bawumia and Ofosu when they were in power. So the noise he is making is inconsequential. It won't add anything to the discourse beyond deliberately trying to mislead people who may not be familiar with the workings of the T-bills market to create the impression of borrowing. If you take our debt today, then we have not added 80 billion Ghana cedis to the debt. How is it that we are borrowing and yet our debt is not going up? If you borrow, don't you owe? But we are not owing because the borrowing is being done to settle maturing debt which Gideon Boako'S boss, Bawumia, left for us when he was head of the economic management team.
I see. And let me stay on the debt a little longer. Then I'll raise an issue, the Burkina Faso issue. There's the matter of, because the biggest criticism of them is the amount of debt that they left behind when they were leaving power. First,
before you go, let me see that in the next 4 years, our total debt payment commitment is 280 billion Ghana cedis. Next year, we have to pay 140 billion Ghana cedis. So more than 70% of all the revenue we collect will go into debt servicing. And that is only because of the terrible borrowing that Bawumia, Gideon Boako'S boss, and Ofosu when they manage Ghana's economy. So they have bequeathed this monstrous problem to us as a government. And we are finding ways of doing that. In fact, when the finance minister now does T-bills operations, because of confidence in the economy, the interest rate has dropped. So when we borrow money to pay off maturing debt, we are actually improving our debt service position because now the interest is lower.
And thank you for raising the issue of the interest. And I guess you heard the criticism of Abner Sassari, that when you're talking about lower interest in terms of T-bills, there's I don't know how to put it, but she says if you look at the current inflation rate, the interest rate, compared to the falling interest rates on the T-bills is creating a situation where people who will invest in T-bills will now move into currency trading. So they will now go and spend.
So government should be paying high interest rates. That's what I've now want. The implication of high interest rates is that government will take more of your money to go and service debt. And if government takes more of your money to service debt, there will be little left to do development projects that are critical. There will be little left to put into education, health, and all the other sectors that are critical and vital to the sustenance of the Ghana's economy.
But I said there's a mismatch. That will not be helpful in the long term.
But I'm saying that the alternative, what she is preaching, is that we should pay high interest. As for the bit about people going to invest in dollars, it is pure speculation. It is not founded on anything. It is speculation. That's all. But if your interest bill is high, it simply means that other sectors will be deprived of financing. Because when government collects your revenue, he has to use a lot more to pay for interest on borrowing rather than putting it into education for the benefit of our children.
Then there's the matter of the bigger debts. They say if you convert them into dollars, you realize that you added more to the debt between 2009 and 2016 than they did for 8 years.
Pedestrian, illogical, political. They are seeking to profit from the destruction of our currency. Because the currency has so depreciated, if you use that to divide the debt, in dollar terms it becomes lower. When you are going to pay debt, you collect cedis. Because Ghana, we don't print dollars. You collect cedis and change it into dollars to go and pay. So if your debt increases, it means that you will pay that amount. You will pay the dollar equivalent of that amount. And to get the dollar equivalent of that amount, you need more cedis than before. So if you owe 721 billion, it is 721 billion you will pay. So you have to convert 721 billion into dollars. And looking for that money means that more of your resources will be shifted from critical expenditure to service higher debt. So they have not said anything profound. Indeed, if I were to use a euphemism, that is a clever by half analysis.
Clever by what?
They are clever by half. You can search what that means.
I see, because the same analysis Amin Adams used on the matter of the energy sector, they inherited 2.5 billion US dollars. They are leaving 2.4 billion US dollars.
So if you convert $2.5 billion in 2017, look at the amount. And do the same conversion today. The only reason why the dollar equivalent appears small is the depreciation of the currency. So it is the local currency that you use to divide the amount to get the dollar amount. As I speak to you, the energy sector owes 80 billion Ghana cedis. When they came to power, we owed less than 10 billion Ghana cedis. So, Senna, what has happened is that now we need 80 billion to service the energy sector instead of 10 billion. Forget about the dollar analysis they are making. It is clever by half. They are seeking to profit from destroying the currency. Because now, the denominator, what you use to divide the debt to get the dollar component, is bigger. And it is bigger because of their incompetence. How they destroyed the currency, how it moved from 4 cities to 17 cities, and now it's over around 16 cities. How can that be good news that anybody can tout? How can that be an achievement? So it is clever by half.
I see. Well, let's move away from them, because I know. Okay, so one first, the president is asking for an audit of the state-owned enterprises. What is necessitating this?
Yeah, because most of them are running at losses, and it's unacceptable. We can't. State-owned enterprises, first and foremost, are businesses, and the only objective for which a business is set up is for profit, so that you can get additional revenue to support your budget. So if these state-owned enterprises have been set up at significant cost to the state, and we expect them to generate revenue, and all they do is to incur more debt for us, then there's a need to look at the operations again to ensure that it aligns with government's objectives. So the president says that they should be audited. First of all, to find out the exact debt position and find out the causes of this recurring losses so that adequate measures can be put to forestall future recurrence.
And it seems to also be suggesting that those he's appointed to those agencies, if they fail to live up to expectation, they are leaving.
Then I'm sure your bosses will not hesitate to fire you if your performance dips and you begin to lose business. Is that not the case?
Yes.
So the same principle applies to state-owned enterprises. Yeah, they may be government-owned. Government is a shareholder. But they are businesses, and businesses are expected to make profit. So to the extent that no business owner will retain staff or managers who continue to incur losses, President Mahama has laid down the ground rules that if you don't make profit, you are out. Or if you continuously make losses without any justified basis, you are out.
So that their task is to bring these agencies from their current loss-making
to profitability.
Oh, okay. So anybody who doesn't do that
without justifiable basis will face severe sanctions.
How much are they allowed to do? Because some of these agencies they've inherited have, I know many of them have overbloated staff.
So they have to do whatever it takes to turn around the fortunes of those companies, because they have not been appointed to repeat the loss making. If loss making was a good thing, then the old managers would have been retained. And people have not been appointed to these agencies for fun. They must live up to expectations. So if you are not doing what you have to do, there's no point retaining you. That's the point that the president seeks to make.
And I'll come to the expectations to conclude, but there's a headline on the front page of the Daily Dispatch newspaper. Following Mahama's intervention, Burkina Faso reverses cereal ban imposed on Ghana. Has this been officially communicated to you?
Well, I'm here to check if official communication. That communication would normally go to the Foreign Ministry and the Trade Ministry. But as part of President Mahama's visit to the Sahelian countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, he raised this issue because Ghanaian businessmen and women had begun to complain about a blockade, a ban imposed on some of the critical inputs that they need for their production. And that ban was the result of the frosty relations that developed between these nations and ECOWAS and the mistrust that existed. So part of the Mahama's visit was aimed at spoiling these frosty relations and ensuring that good neighborliness existed between Ghana and these three countries, and also to find out what the issues informing their particular posturing is. I beg your pardon. And it emerged that there was room for these blockades to be relooked, reviewed, and a way forward charted to ensure that